Before the sun ever touched the frozen fields, medieval nights had already done their damage. For ordinary people, winter darkness was not a quiet pause between days. It was a trial of endurance that returned night after night, year after year. When the cold settled in, sleep became less a comfort and more a strategy for survival. Most common people did not sleep in beds as we imagine them today. There were no heated bedrooms, no thick mattresses, no privacy. A peasant's home was a single room shared with family, animals, tools, and stored food. Walls were thin, often little more than wood, mud, or rough stone. Wind slipped through cracks without resistance. The night air crept inside and stayed. When darkness fell, the fire was allowed to die. Wood was precious, and no one wasted fuel while sleeping. As embers faded, the cold took control. Breath turned visible, fingers stiffened. Sleep clothes were the same garments worn during the day, layered and unwashed. Linen against the skin, wool on top, sometimes fur if one was lucky. Beds, when they existed, were simple frames filled with straw or dried leaves. Over time, these fillings broke down into dust and rot. They offered little softness and almost no insulation. Many slept directly on the floor, closer to the animals whose body heat helped warm the room. This was not affection. It was necessity. Families slept together, pressed tightly under shared blankets. Children, parents, and sometimes grandparents formed a single mass of bodies, conserving heat like huddled animals. Movement during the night was minimal. To shift position meant letting cold air rush in. Stillness became instinct. Fear followed the cold. Illness thrived in winter. A cough could become fatal. Frostbite was rare indoors, but weakness was common. Sleep was shallow, broken by pain, hunger, or the sound of wind scraping against walls. Night was long, and dawn came slowly. For ordinary medieval people, sleep was not escape. It was endurance practiced in darkness, wrapped in straw and breath, waiting for morning to return warmth to the world. As winter deepened, nights grew longer, and sleep began to follow a rhythm unfamiliar to the modern world. Ordinary people rarely slept straight through the darkness. Instead, rest came in fragments. A first sleep would take hold soon after nightfall, heavy and deep from exhaustion. Then, hours later, people would wake. This waking was not unusual. It was expected. In the silence between sleeps, people prayed, whispered, tended the fire if embers remained, or simply lay still, listening to the cold press against the walls. Some mended clothes by touch alone. Others checked animals or children. Darkness was total. Light was dangerous and expensive. Most waited patiently for sleep to return. Cold dictated posture. People slept curled inward, conserving warmth. Limbs tucked close to the body, faces partially covered by fabric, breathing through wool that trapped heat and moisture. Frost sometimes formed on the inside of walls. Condensation froze near windows. The house itself seemed to sleep poorly, groaning as wood contracted and stone chilled. Blankets were shared, layered, reused until they thinned. A single heavy wool cover might serve an entire family. Beneath it, straw rustled with every movement. Fleas thrived there, biting exposed skin. Itching was constant. Rest was never complete. For those without homes, nights were worse. Laborers, travelers, and the very poor slept in barns, sheds, or wherever walls blocked the wind. Hay offered insulation but little protection from damp. Snow could drift inside. Many slept sitting up, backs against timber, wrapped in whatever cloth they owned. Survival depended on not falling too deeply asleep. Dreams were shaped by hunger and cold. Sleep was not an escape from hardship, but an extension of it. Bodies recovered just enough to work again at dawn. Strength was borrowed from rest and repaid with pain. Winter nights taught discipline. To waste heat was to suffer. To waste sleep was to weaken. Ordinary people learned to endure darkness as a season, not an event. Night after night they lay waiting, listening for the faint promise of morning, knowing that sleep was not comfort, but preparation for another day of labor. Winter reshaped behavior itself. When night erased the world outside, people retreated inward, not only into their homes, but into silence. Talking stopped early. Movement slowed. Every action cost energy, and energy meant heat. To survive the coldest nights, people learned restraint. Children were trained quickly. Crying wasted warmth. Restlessness invited sickness. Elders remembered winters that killed, and their memory governed the household. Doors were sealed with cloth, cracks stuffed with straw and rags. Anything that slowed the wind was pressed into service. Still, cold always found a way in. Clothing was never removed. Boots stayed close. Cloaks became blankets. Hats were pulled low, even in sleep, because heat escaped through the head. Hair was rarely washed in winter. Wetness meant danger. Cleanliness surrendered to survival. Illness spread easily at night. Bodies weakened by hunger and cold could not fight infection. A fever in winter was feared more than injury. Sleep offered no protection. Many died quietly during the night, discovered only when morning light failed to wake them. Death was not dramatic. It was still expected and close. Religious belief wrapped around sleep like another layer of cloth. Night was associated with spirits, judgment, and temptation. Prayers were spoken before lying down, not for peaceful dreams, but to wake again. Sleep resembled surrender. To close one's eyes in winter required faith that dawn would return. Animals were essential. Livestock shared space not out of kindness, but function. Their breath warmed the room. Their bodies blocked drafts. The smell was constant, heavy, and accepted. Comfort did not exist, only degrees of suffering. When storms came, sleep became impossible. Wind howled through gaps, snow pressed against walls and doors, roofs groaned under weight. People remained awake for hours, listening for collapse, ready to flee into darkness if the structure failed. Rest was postponed. Survival took priority. By spring, bodies carried the evidence. Weight lost, joints stiff, coughs lingering. Winter sleep preserved life, but it took payment. The nights did not heal. They endured. For ordinary medieval people, the coldest nights were not faced with hope or resistance. They were accepted, endured quietly, survived through habit, closeness, and discipline. Sleep was not an escape from winter. It was simply how one waited for it to end. When winter finally loosened its grip, survival itself felt like victory. Those who endured the nights carried their discipline into daylight. Sleep had taught them patience, silence, and economy. Nothing was wasted. Not heat, not food, not strength. Winter shaped people as surely as tools shaped wood. There was no belief that comfort was owed. Cold nights were not seen as cruel or unfair. They were simply part of the world. To complain was pointless. To adapt was everything. The body learned limits early. How little rest was enough. How much hunger could be tolerated. How close another body needed to be to share warmth without conflict. Morning after a bitter night brought no relief, only proof of survival. Stiff limbs unfolded slowly. Breath still fogged the air. The fire was coaxed back to life with care, using the smallest pieces saved for this moment. Children were woken gently, not out of kindness, but necessity. Energy had to be preserved even in waking. The memory of cold never left. Even in summer, habits remained. Blankets were repaired, not discarded. Straw was replaced carefully. Roofs were inspected. Winter was always coming back. Sleep, shaped by hardship, became preparation rather than rest. Modern ideas of sleep as comfort, privacy, or recovery would have seemed foreign. For ordinary medieval people, sleep was functional. It was an act of conservation, a pause taken not for pleasure, but because the body could go no further. It was fragile, easily broken, and never taken for granted. Those who lived through the coldest nights rarely spoke of them. Suffering was ordinary, survival was expected. The dead were remembered briefly, then life continued. Spring erased the frost, but not the lessons. In the end, medieval sleep reveals something simple and unforgiving. Life was not softened by darkness. Night did not heal. It tested. And those who closed their eyes in the cold did so knowing that sleep was not promised, warmth was never guaranteed, and morning was something to be earned. They slept not because they were safe, but because they had no other choice.